Many believe the reinstatement of the COVID-19 Social Relief of Distress grant is a step closer to a universal basic income guarantee. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni says Treasury will need at least 27 billion rand for the current grant. To speak to us about whether the grant goes far enough, we're joined by Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute Director Isabel Fry, as well as Pay the Grant spokesperson Dedi Mabe. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time tonight. I'll begin with you, Dedi. Do you think this social relief grant goes far enough in terms of addressing some of the inequality issues as well as, the poverty issues that South Africa is facing?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. No, not at all. Not at all. There's research that has been conducted, and there's been a number of amounts that have been explained in terms of the lower poverty bound, higher poverty bound, and those kind of things. But 350, it's quite low. However, we must be appreciative because it's the step to the right direction.
And Isabel, do you think this is a step then towards, getting the country to get to a level where we see a basic income grant, or do we still have a long way to go?
Thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity. It's good to be with Daddy as well. I think that we need to be encouraged by the words of the Minister herself, who said that the rollout of social relief of distress should ideally be seen as a stepping stone towards basic income. And I don't think that we have seen stronger words of encouragement emanating from a cabinet minister since 2002 with the tailored grant release report, which recommended a basic income grant. I do want to say that today also marks the signing off at NEDLAC of a 6-year process of research into comprehensive social security, including the research into the feasibility of the basic income grant that has been mentioned by government before. So with that now being signed off, it seems that the way is open for the Department of Social Development to release the green paper, which includes recommendations around a basic income grant. It does seem that at last there's an alignment in order to address the growing horror of poverty and destitution that the Minister also referred to. I think it's important to note that in the research that she referenced in her press briefing today, she identified a big improvement on inequality that the first social relief of distress grant had caused, the fact that it was used to buy food and that food was local food which promoted economic development, and finally the very welcome fact, and it's something we've spoken about before, that women caregivers are being included in the social relief of distress. So as Comrade Daddy was saying, 350 rand is not, it's only 60% of the current food poverty line. It's a small beginning, and I want to say that from the research that we've done at SPI, it's critical to look at the correct amount, because we want to have a grant that transforms our economy, that gives people the ability to be strong economic activists, and that means paying the 1,268, the upper bound food poverty line. And finally, I just wanted to say, in response to your opening question, that we don't want this to be seen as an unemployment grant. We want people to be working. We want grants to be seen as a springboard to enable people to take that risk, to take that job, and to start that small micro-entrepreneur which would grow big. We want this to be a developmental grant and not a consumptive grant. And we really call through to social policy advisors, to Cabinet, to start looking at this concept of unemployment. It shouldn't be an obstacle. A grant should be an enabler of employment.
And Dedi, the Minister says that there's a lot of lessons that they've learned during this process, and she's really working hard with her team and the department to ensure that these are not repeated. There were a lot of concerns that were raised by the beneficiaries who were saying either the system is not recognizing them, they're not able to get payments processed on time, or even them saying that they're battling with things as simple as registration. How sure are you at this stage that government will get a handle on things and will see a better system?
Look, I want to say, I think Minister Zulu has to be given credit. She has to be trusted. Of all the ministers, like Comrade Isabel is saying, she has appeared to be the only one that has been very upfront. So if she's saying they've been working to the systems to fine-tune them, we can trust her. I think in here we've got an ally in the governing party.
And let's talk then, Daddy, around one of the concerns, and this was, those that were not intended to receive this money and then thus receiving it, and they also included some government employees. Are you sure then, as you say, you've got an ally, and really crediting the minister, as you say, that she is understanding of what needs to be done here? How sure then are we that those who are found wanting will be dealt with, especially when you're looking at the history that we've seen here and some of those who've only faced internal disciplinary, and we're still awaiting to see if there'll be any criminal processes?
Yeah, I think that is a very big question. But I was talking to the fact that she's making a commitment in terms of fine-tuning the systems. But then so far, the getting people to account, if one has to draw a lesson from the broader societal issues, one can only hope that ultimately those who have crooked the system get to pay.
And Isabel, how important is it going to be that there is accountability here, especially when you look at the previous cycle, where we saw that more than 25,000 people who were not entitled to receive this grant got it, and around 241 government employees were in fact beneficiaries here?
I think your question speaks to the very heart of what we're hoping to see that this grant does. We're hoping to see that social relief of distress grant, as announced in the last few days, would restore a relationship of trust between people and the state. And that trust we saw severely undermined in recent weeks. To do that, the system needs to be seen as being above any kind of corrupt activity. To our mind, we need to acknowledge the extent of successful social relief of distress grant distribution. We're talking of about over 6 million people who were intended, who did receive it. And we need to, as Comrade Daddy say, praise the government for having done that, and SASSA, recognizing the problems that they had. But the minister also in the press briefing spent quite a bit of time talking about the integrity of the registration system, as well as the data on that. And we know that for many people, the re-registration will be a concern. It'll be a challenge. It will cost them money to do. But it does also seem that if we can get this right and weed out people who are not eligible, that will be an extremely important step, not just for social relief of distress, but for government to have the correct details of people on their system, for health messaging, for questions of educational reach out, but also, ideally, for the growing of social relief of distress into a basic income grant that goes to everybody. It speaks as well to the question of universality, because in a way what we see through social grants, because of the means testing, because of the eligibility criteria that people have to go through, that we do get a criminalization of people, not the criminal elements that you spoke about, but often people are not able, who are intended beneficiaries, are not able to negotiate the successful application. We call that errors of exclusion, when the wrong people are excluded. We're looking for a system that has errors of inclusion, where everybody is included. So actually, they're not errors of inclusion. I made a mistake there. We want everybody to be included on the system, so that when people start getting paid to grants, for instance, it's very clear that they shouldn't be entitled to that. The more transparent the system, the better it is for citizens' faith in the state, that it gets the right amount to the right person at the right time.
As you say, Daddy, that the minister has been very supportive and has stood by and really ensured that this process is indeed working. One of the things that is going to be needed as well, especially when it comes to the process of re-registration, as Isabel says, is the real support that those who are going to these local offices are going to require? Because sometimes they get there and they are told you can call the call center, and the call center is not assisting them, and they're told you can go to head office, and then they don't get assistance. And these are people that really need this money desperately. So it's going to be important for the real support on the ground to match the minister's actions.
No, 100%. Yes, 100%. And, you know, because we'll only be starting to test the system from the 6th. For now, we can take the minister's words on whatever that she has said, and we can only complain if we are disappointed and the whole system has failed us. For now, we believe that they've identified all the problems, because we've been keeping constant what's called communication and pressure to tell them what the challenges are, and we are hoping and we are trusting on her word that we are not going to have problems. Otherwise, if we are back to square one, then we'll be extremely disappointed, really.
And Daddy, one of the things that, you know, a person may look at it and think it's just a simple issue, but other, you know, people who are not really familiar with technology have also been complaining that the one-time password expires very quickly, and thus not being able to reach someone that can be able to assist them in time, because it may just have, you know, expired.
No, 100%. I think that is one problem that must be highlighted. Because now, most of the time, we find that a person has to call in 3, 4, 5 times. And not everybody is aware that after the initial challenges, we have to request the one-time what's called PIN. Most people leave it at that, and they come and complain. We try to assist. Now we end up with a situation whereby the claimant use someone else's phone to help them to access the system, which eventually also brings some problems, because ultimately when there's a query, you find that the recipient's number is not the very number that applied for them. So that is one issue they must solve. They must allow people enough time after sending them the OTP so that they can, use that OTP without having to rush, because not everybody is able to use cell phones fast enough.
All right. Thank you so much to you both for your time. We certainly do appreciate it, and we really hope that we catch up again to see how the system is going, and whether or not you are hearing from some people who are really giving you the feedback, and hopefully the system is really working to address some of the concerns that have been raised by those intended beneficiaries. That was the Director of Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, Isobel Fry, and Pay the Grants spokesperson, Dedi Mabe.